City Journal podcast. I'm your host, Charles Fain Lehman, a fellow at the Manhattan Institute and senior editor of City Journal. Joining me on our panel today are Hannah Meyers, director of all things public safety at the Manhattan Institute, Daniel Di Martino, immigration guy at the Manhattan Institute, and Ilya Shapiro, constitution guy at the Manhattan Institute. We're going to jump right into the news, and specifically we're going to dip into the story of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Salvadoran man / Maryland father / domestic abuse alleged committer / may or may not have been in MS-13. Individual was deported by the Trump administration, possibly accidentally, to El Salvador. Abrego Garcia's case has become sort of a cause celeb, with those on the right seeing him as an example of the person that we really want to get rid of, and those on the left seeing his case as an obvious and substantial deprivation of due process. There's some really live and interesting issues here, so I want to get right into it. Ilya, there's been a great deal of back and forth at the Supreme Court and in the courts generally over Abrego Garcia's case. What do you see as the state of play? And, who do you think has the better argument, the administration or their critics?
Yeah, so let's work backwards counterintuitively. What the Supreme Court said was it affirmed the lower court ruling against the administration, but asked it to clarify what facilitate means. That is, the government is ordered to facilitate Garcia's return. What does that mean? The government's lawyers have represented. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, has said that a plane is ready to go. We're removing all domestic impediments to his return. Is that good enough? It's unclear, actually. It's unclear whether a federal court has the authority, for example, to tell the president, even deferentially, do whatever you think is right to diplomatically get the exchange, get Garcia back. Ask Bukele, the president of El Salvador, to get him back, or whatever other channels. I'm not telling you how to use your foreign affairs power, but facilitate his return. Again, there's just not really law on this, on whether the district court's jurisdiction extends to that, and that is where the legal fight is going on. Nobody disputes that there was an error. The administration says there was an administrative error, and to be clear, there was an order of removal imposed and affirmed against Garcia, but then there was another order saying that he can't be removed to El Salvador specifically. I imagine what's really going on in the background right now is the administration is trying to negotiate to send him somewhere else, whether it's another neighboring Central American country, to some island in the Pacific that they've sent people to in the past under these kinds of deals, or what. But it's sort of become a political piñata. The legal issue is fairly narrow. I don't think it's a constitutional crisis. I don't think it's the administration trying to ignore the Supreme Court or what have you. But it's all about this definition of facilitate. Meanwhile, it's become a political piñata, if you will. And I think the Democrats, Van Hollen on down, like in the Mohammed Khalil case, are not picking a very good poster child for resisting immigration, the administration's immigration policies.
Sorry, Ilya, one question about that. Imagine this case was not about him. Imagine it had been an American who had been wrongfully deported. Does a court have the authority to tell the president, you must return an American that you're wrongfully deported?
I think that's the same legal question. An American would have more legal rights, but that doesn't go to the question of what power a court has to order the executive branch generally, or the president specifically, to act with respect to the foreign affairs power. The American would probably be able to file for habeas corpus in various ways, but again, the court's jurisdiction does not extend to a Salvadorian prison.
I guess the American could, or even Abrego Garcia, could they sue for damages and then get a monetary reward for that?
Unclear. That would be kind of a what's known as a Bivens action for violation of federal civil rights, and the court does not like to expand. It really hasn't applied that in many years. I don't think damages is really what Here, you can stay in the Salvadorian prison, but the government has to pay your family $10,000 a day or something. That's kind of an odd resolution of this.
And what concerns me about all of this is that if the precedent is that if they mistakenly deport you, no matter your legal status, and especially if you're an American citizen, and there is no recourse for you, that is kind of a way out for a future president. I'm not saying that that's what the Trump administration is trying to do. I actually don't think so. I just think this was really a mistake. But they could just take anyone and they just send them to another country and you get rid of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is, and I want to talk about the policy implications in a second. It seems to me, at least, that the question is a little thornier when it comes to removing an American citizen. Right? There is a substantive difference between, as Ilya alluded to, American citizens have habeas rights everywhere on Earth. That the court has said pretty clearly. It's also the case that there's a substantive difference between asking El Salvador to give us one of its own citizens so that we can perform procedure on him and then probably ultimately give him back, because like his credible fear claim is no longer plausible because it was based on there being gangs in El Salvador that no longer exist. There's a big difference between asking for a Salvadoran citizen and asking for an American citizen back. That said, I think this is a real ambiguous question. I do want to talk just for a second, Daniel, about sort of why they've done this. I mean, the administration has been extremely recalcitrant. It said, we're going to facilitate it. But there is this sort of like legal two-step where, on the one hand, the courts can't make them give Garcia back. On the other hand, like, El Salvador's a client state. If we said to El Salvador, give us 3 ponies and a mule, they would absolutely do it. They would totally give us this guy back if we asked.
Even beyond that, Charles, I just learned of this from a piece by Andrew McCarthy on Friday in National Review. There's a treaty, or at least an agreement, between the U.S. and El Salvador when they were negotiating the housing of people that the U.S. could send to this Salvadorian prison, that at any time, either the Secretary of State or the President could simply ask for someone back, and Salvador is bound to give them back. So there's even that.
Wow.
Why he got such a cushy audience the other week?
No, I think that was mostly a photo op. You're referring to the meeting with Senator Chris Van Hollen and Garcia. That was, I mean,
it was like in the cafeteria of I don't know, assisted living.
It reminded me of the beer summit. You know, Obama and the guy.
You have to think what's going on here is that Bukele is in cahoots with Trump about this. I mean, they are not asking for him to be back. They want him to remain there. And this is very dangerous for the administration legally, because the courts have ordered them to facilitate it. And with any FOIA, I am almost certain that you can find emails or text messages between different government officials saying, yes, do this, we don't want him back, and like literally flaunting the law. Now it was discovered that Bukele put the margaritas and all of that on purpose and then took the photo.
In this photo op.
Like, this is classic an American move. And you know what? This is a great political strategy. Bukele's not doing anything illegal because American courts do not apply to him, right? And by the way, Abrego Garcia, the more information we find out about him, the more it looks like he was actually an MS-13 gang member. You saw the tattoos on his knuckles that the White House, I know they share like a digitally altered image with like MS-13 written on top. But it was more like a description of what the tattoo meant.
He has some tattoos on his hands that
it was
may or
so
may
bad.
Not mean MS-13, and that his wife keeps blocking out an Instagram
Exactly.
photo.
His wife's social media blurred the tattoos every time she posted something with his knuckles on it. So clearly they wanted to hide this. Clearly he claimed that he was MS-13, so that's why he couldn't be sent back to El Salvador. So come on, like, can't the Democrats just find an innocent person to defend? Why do they have to defend gang members?
Yeah, I mean, and this is a question I want to bring Hannah in on this too. Is there's a political angle to all this, because on the one hand, there's a very technical legal debate going on here about core powers of the executive and can you compel the return of this guy. On the other hand, it's like, there were 5 to 6 million people in the country who are sort of plausibly democratically deportable, in the sense that like most of the public would support removing Biden-era rivals and criminals. And this guy is like almost certainly one, if not both of these, at least one of these. And so to the average American, it's just like, why are you fussing over sending this guy back to El Salvador? And I wonder about, how the politics plays out here. Like, a friend put it this way, she's like, this is the first time I might believe in 5D chess from the Trump administration.
You'd think that gay hairdresser who was mistakenly apparently also sent to the same prison
Maybe.
as part of the Tren de Aragua,
There.
Venezuelan gang thing would be a better poster child for this.
And it's not
And the
his
Supreme Court had a
country,
ruling,
he
a
was-
midnight
it's
ruling
not
on
his
that over the
country.
weekend as well.
It's very effective. I don't know. I mean, I think that's one thing that makes it so frustrating when the Trump administration is reckless doing the things that are so important to do, like limiting the, monitoring federal agencies to make sure there isn't waste. Well, could you just do it in a not reckless way so that the narrative doesn't spin out of control about how you're doing it? Because it's so important. Deporting violent criminals that are all coming here is so important. And then, doing it in this way that had all these little errors that seem really unnecessary, down to the police officer who had put Garcia into the gang database originally, then was prosecuted for corruption because he tipped off a brothel madam who he frequented. Just like every level of it has all these little that then just weaken the whole thing. And they are really
If this
effective.
was written for a TV show, it'd be rejected as too fanciful.
Too fanciful. Yeah, I don't know. And even his wife saying, "Oh, I didn't mean, we're working out the domestic abuse. I've had a lot of domestic abuse partners in the past, and so I'm a little sensitive about it." Where it's like, "Oh, well, then you for sure didn't again."
The ideal immigrant.
Right. I mean, I think that's the core of the issue. And, the administration's line is like, we have been put here to remove immigrants that most reasonable people agree should not be here. And it is hard to make the argument to the average voter who doesn't know what habeas corpus means, that this is a serious violation. Notwithstanding the fact that it seems like, in this particular instance, the sort of the tiptoeing around non-compliance seems like a serious future issue.
I think we, again, got here by having such weak law and order for the last 4, 8, 10 years. Because, I live in the Columbia University area, and there's just posters everywhere of Mahmoud Khalil, looking off in the light, Soviet propaganda style. What's that?
We talked about 2 episodes ago.
Yes, exactly. Free Khalil. And again, why would we want him here in Morningside Heights? He obviously supports terror. He obviously is someone, I don't want him around here. I don't know enough about, I'm not as good as some of our colleagues in nitpicking the legality of how easy it will be to deport him. But certainly we don't want him. But had we just, used a little bit of basic law and order over the past year and a half around Columbia in terms of vandalism and kidnapping maintenance staff and walking around masked screaming about Zionists, it wouldn't be an issue because he wouldn't.
If all these people had been charged and convicted with the crimes that they committed, we wouldn't even have had to go through the specific revocation process. It would have been automatically revoked.
Let me, and I want to take this out
with the deportation. I think it's because we let it get so out of control, and now we're doing things that seem more drastic, where it's easier to seem reckless because it's really hard to put the toothpaste back in the law and order tube.
I want to, and I think that's right, and I want to bring Daniel in before we move on, because I think this is something he and I have been talking about, and I'm curious for your thoughts, Daniel. It is the case that there was a great deal of recklessness in the prior administration that results in a very large influx of particularly illegal immigration, and I think the administration is sort of the current administration is trying to clean that up. They may be doing it poorly, but I mean, is there a way to do it well? Is there an available way to do it well? How do you think about that?
Yes, in about a month from now, my next report with the Manhattan Institute is coming out. It's about how we can do this in a, orderly way, and that is with immigration judges, meaning to deport someone, you need a deportation order. The deportation orders are issued by employees of the Department of Justice that we call immigration judges. They're part of the Executive Office of Immigration Review, and we have about 700 of those in the country. I estimated that if the Trump administration just hired an extra 250 ones a year, so 1,000 over 4 years, you could get rid of the entire backlog of deportation cases and immigration cases in courts within the 4 years of the Trump administration. And then you can just not hire anymore. Just let them be, quit through attrition. It would cost you about $1 billion a year, which, let's be real, on reconciliation,
you could redirect some of the people who are. You could redirect some of the people who are being fired by Doge.
They could become
maybe,
judges.
yeah, maybe.
Right, after the Trump administration, there are only these are all administrative law judges. So after the Trump administration gusts the National Labor Relations Board, all those guys could go become immigration judges.
Talk about efficiency.
What they're trying to do, though, and I saw this recently, is that instead they're trying to not hire new judges. They've actually fired some, but they will try to make them decide more cases faster. So they're really going to pressure them. They're saying dismiss cases that are incomplete. That might be an issue. So I'm not sure about the legalities. I just think that if they want a quick legal way that is not going to be challenged to do their agenda, just ask Congress in reconciliation, give me $1 billion a year and we solve the deportation mess, and they will give it to you.
All right, I wanna take us out. Before we jump to the next topic, let me ask just the administration has a mandate or thinks it has a mandate to remove like millions and millions of people. Are they going to succeed? Is the illegal immigrant population going to be substantially lower at the end of the next 4 years, or like last Trump administration, is it going to be a little bit higher? Daniel, what do you think?
I think it's going to be lower. I also think the legal immigrant population is going to be lower. I think they're not going to reach 1 million people a year. They might reach, maybe 2 million over the 4 years entirely of deportations. But but the main reason it's going to be lower is because entries are going to be very low. And some people are going to self-deport. That's going to happen. I'm just concerned that part of the decrease is just going to be, decreasing legal entries too. We're seeing massive decreases in tourism because of news stories that are freaking people out to come to America. We're going to see a lot of fewer people maybe come to work and do other business activities. So there's going to be a downside there. But I certainly think that the illegal immigrant population is going to be lower. But it's not going. We're not going to push out all the people that Biden let in 4 years.
Hannah, briefly, lower, higher? What's your prediction?
What Daniel just said, because I trust his take on this.
Fair, Ilya.
It's going to be lower. You asked whether it's going to be substantially lower. I don't know about those ly adverbs, but in 2023, the U.S. made about 1 million repatriations, deportations. So I think we can probably hit that number.
Ilya, though, I'll say those numbers on repatriations, that includes all the people that showed up at the border and were turned away. Now, because few people are showing up at the border.
You have the better numbers. What is the high? I have this recollection that like the last year of Obama was particularly high.
Yes. So when we look at deportations, we really mean people from the interior, right? Not people who are just showing up at the border. And that is in the hundreds of thousands. Really, the maximum it's been is like near 500,000. Yeah. So if Trump went like full speed, I'm going to reach the peak for 4 years, he will reach 2 million people in 4 years.
I think that's plausible. I think the other thing they have going for them is just apparently deterrence works. And so the number of encounters at the border has dropped to near zero. And so just fewer people coming in as a result, the backlog will just decline mechanically because the admission rate is lower. So I do think they'll get there. I think Daniel's probably right. You're not going to be getting 2 million people a year. I want to move us on to our next topic. This is City Journal podcast. And so we're going to talk a lot about cities, and particularly our dear city of New York, where there is a hotly contested race for the mayoralty. Over the weekend, Mayor Eric Adams, just mayor of New York City, for those who don't know, made an appearance on Laura Trump's show on Fox. He defended his push to cooperate with the Trump administration and specifically allowing ICE to return to the city. New York's a sanctuary city. New York State is a sanctuary state. It's hotly controversial. For those who don't know, Adams recently dropped out of the Democratic primary, and he's now running a Hail Mary re-election bid as an independent. Meanwhile, in the Democratic primary, former Governor Andrew Cuomo looks likely to be the nominee, but he's facing a serious challenge from Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani, who's running at about 20% to Cuomo's 45%. So I wanna sort of come to Adams first, though. What do we make of this most recent move to sort of double and triple down on immigration enforcement and his work with the Trump administration? Does he have any kind of chance, Hannah? Like, is he going to get anywhere? Or is he totally done?
I don't know. The first time he won, I feel like he got the law and order vote the first time just by being like real old school. He wasn't making like a complicated conservative argument. He wasn't being that law and order or stringent. He was just being like, hey, we need police, kind of thing. And I think he's trying to get that again here, but focusing more on immigration. Like, hey, we spent billions of dollars in New York City that could have gone to other things, as he said. It could have went to this and it could have went to that. It was his explanation, to children, to seniors, and instead it went to illegal immigrants. And I think he's just trying to market that kind of like reasonable guy tack. It's going to be hard against Cuomo, but Cuomo doesn't have that voice. He has his reputation as being savvy and competent and a real politician's politician. He has more baggage than Adams, in terms of things people hate about him, the letting old people die during COVID, the sexual harassment stuff, and also that he himself was governor when we passed discovery reform and bail reform and lots of things that are now the thing we're pushing back against. And he hasn't really been clear that he would undo that work, that he's culpable, that it went wrong, what he would do to change it. And then Mamdani really shows that if you go full throttle progressive, you can just win all that. You just push aside all the slightly more reasonable progressives and just be full anti-Semitic pinko, and you'll get far, which is just so depressing. But hopefully,
let's get real here. And I'm the one panelist who doesn't live in New York, have never lived in New York, other than I guess one summer during law school.
We miss you.
If you're not going to vote for the socialist, which I imagine most Democrats are not, they'll have Cuomo warts and all, and it's a Democratic city. He'll beat Adams. Isn't that the dynamic, or is what we're really talking about here that there's a new lane opening up for our Generalissimo Raihan to jump in?
I mean, we can't comment on any pending electoral campaign for Raihan. No, so I think
Nor make endorsements.
No endorsements. You don't make endorsements.
I was asking an
empirical
question
of. So I think the really interesting question about what happens in the race is. Adams is the incumbent. He has an incumbency advantage, although he's not very popular. So you have Adams on the ballot. You have Cuomo on the ballot. There is a lot of discussion of if Mamdani does not win the Democratic primary, he will still likely be able to run on the Working Families Party line, which is a major third party in New York State. So he could also be on the ballot, and there will be a Republican on the ballot. Curtis Sliwa is likely to be renominated. So it's a weird race. Maybe some people decide they want Adams because they don't like Cuomo. Maybe Mamdani draws if Cuomo and Adams and Sliwa all draw some votes, maybe Mamdani could end up getting a plurality, if not a majority. Things could get pretty weird. I do think that the calculus is the most likely outcome is that Cuomo gets elected, but I think there's a real question about New Yorkers and how they feel at this moment. Daniel, I'm curious for your take as what's your read on the situation as another New Yorker?
I mean, I just know. Look, anyone but the socialist. If it is crooked like Adams, it's okay. The socialists are more crooked. Don't worry. They will reveal themselves in time. Mamdani is essentially running for president of Venezuela on the United Socialist Party of Venezuela line with Maduro. And, it might sound funny, but that's exactly what he wants. He wants government grocery stores. He obviously government healthcare, obviously, but like government grocery stores. He wants everybody to live in public housing. It's like, yes, in my backyard, but you're gonna be forced to live in public housing, and that's insane. He would destroy the city if he could.
Social workers in place of mental health, in place of police.
Of course, no police. We have to defund the police. Like it's worse because most socialist countries at least are safe. Like the socialists of America are like socialism but with crime. The cherry on top. And then Cuomo, I saw his video launching the campaign. I like a lot of the things he's proposing. I just kind of don't believe that he believes any of the things he says. I think he's just there to be in power, like a lot of career politicians. And Adams kind of, it's also in a lot of problems. If anything, Curtis Sliwa, might be like the most honest one of them all. I don't know much about him, to be honest. But he seems like a good guy in his heart.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
one thing I want to underscore there is the question about Mamdani, and I think this gets to a bigger discussion of urban politics. I'm curious for people to weigh in, which is, there seems to be 20% of the Democratic electorate keeps going up, who are just saying we don't want A, they don't want Cuomo, but B, they so don't want Cuomo, who is sort of perceived as a more moderate candidate, that they're willing to vote for Daniel's right, an explicit out and out socialist. There's this sort of like Brooklyn socialist vote that he's likely to capture. I mean, and so I wonder about more broadly, do people see that as a viable political strategy for urban candidates going forward, right? On the one hand, he's probably not going to win, but on the other hand, he's doing surprisingly well. In 2025, we've allegedly had this vibe shift, this backlash. What do we make of the fact that there's a socialist candidate who can pick up 20% of the Democratic primary vote in New York in 2025?
Well, I think that there's something to be said too for we have another little bit before the primary, and crime has been going down a lot under Police Commissioner Tisch, and with that vibe,
New NYPD commissioner.
NYPD, yeah, Police Commissioner, and other sort of elements of the vibe shift that pushed policy and strategy in the city back towards something a little bit more pre-progressive, a little bit more traditional. And I wonder if it bears even more fruit toward the summer and people are enjoying New York more, whether that'll adjust it. But I wonder if it's also, the disillusionment with the sort of the move away from the progressives of Kamala Harris, who lost so disastrously. And now there are all these young people who still want that feeling, who are pretty ignorant about socialism and what's been tried and failed a little bit. And so they're going to jump at it without even knowing what the heck's going on and just sort of thinking, well, if he's a mainstream candidate, this must be a reasonable way to run a city. We've never experienced it. Let's try this.
Well,
if he only gets 20%, that in the Democratic primary in New York, I mean, that would be a positive thing.
I think he'll get more at the end of the ranked choice voting thing, but I do think that Cuomo will beat him handily. But my concern is,
36. Sorry.
Remember, New York had done this massive shift to the right in the last election. I think some of that, if not a lot of that, is going to revert for the mayoral election just because now Trump is in office. There's going to be a very large Democratic turnout, more than Republican, I think. And so the Democrats are going to win the mayoral election. The question is who. And if Eric Adams is running at the same time as an independent and divides some of the vote and shifts some of the vote away from Cuomo, what are the percentages going to look like, right? I don't know that.
I think that's a good opportunity to go to our last question, which is next year on Inauguration Day, who is going to be mayor of New York City? Hannah, what's your answer?
Reihan Salam.
In a coup that we will help orchestrate.
The dream.
If only. Ilya, who's new mayor?
I don't know. I'm focused west and south, where the future of America lies.
You take that back, Ilya.
We're pushing New York into the sea. Daniel, what's
It's gonna be Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah, I'm forced to agree. I think it's gonna be I think Andrew Cuomo is gonna be yet another mayor who is going to rule in spite of how unpopular he is, which is a persistent problem, right? You go back to de Blasio, people like Bloomberg, a little iffy on Bloomberg at the end, but same thing with Adams. He's gonna become the least unpopular of all the unpopular choices, and that will let him pull it out. All right, before we wrap up, let's just talk a little bit about what's going on in the culture. Over the weekend, the unexpected breakout film of the Easter weekend was The King of Kings, which was an animated retelling of Charles Dickens's adaptation of the story of Christ. It's the work of a new studio, Angel Studios, which is meant to deliver sort of more religiously themed content to audiences who are starved for that from Hollywood and are interested in seeing those stories depicted. I will admit, not seen The King of Kings because it's not really my story, but that's okay. It sounds like it did well, and I'm glad that people got to see it. But I'm curious, I want to hear from our panelists, what story from the Bible would you like to see next adapted to the silver screen in animation or non-animation? Hannah, what's your pick?
Well, thanks for coming to me first. I think the Book of Esther, which is what we read on Purim, because there's a guy who's wicked and he wants to annihilate all the Jews. And at the end, he gets hanged with all his sons. and it's very satisfying. And there's a lot of carousing, and there's a lot of feasting, and there's a lot of drinking. It stars a gorgeous Jewess who I'm sure they would cast a Shiksa play in true Hollywood form, like I don't know, Blake Lively or someone. Right?
Blake Lively is
As
Esther.
opposed to Gal Gadot or someone obvious. Yeah, that would. I'd take my kids to that.
And
Okay.
well, but you could also have lots of drinking parties surrounding that because
Yes, and then
it's a
the
mitzvah to
drowning
get
out.
drunk. Yeah.
Yeah, drink
gonna
till you
bring-
don't know one character from the other. There's a lot of marketing potential here.
A lot of marketing potential. Ilya, what's your pick?
I think it's time for a remake of the Ten Commandments. I mean, it's been
Yeah.
what 60 years since what year was that? 70 years, even 1956. So that's been a long time. You know, having just gone through Passover, you know, the story of Exodus and all that. I don't know who would play the Charlton Heston, the Moses role now. I'm not going to start playing amateur casting director, but I think
They're
that
gonna
would make
cast a
for a
black
good movie.
person.
Although Charles has a really good Bible beard. I'm not the first to point out. So
Our producer in the chat, our producer Isabella says it should be Glenn Powell, which would totally happen. It would work. Daniel, what's your pick?
popular.
Do you know, by the way, I do know Angel Studios, and I mean, they were the ones that made Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
Remember? Very big movie. I really liked it, I will say. You know, I think, and I was checking if somebody had made this movie before, but about the book of Daniel, which has always been my favorite book in the Bible. In part, obviously, I'm Daniel, and my mom read me the children's
That's why I like
Bible.
Passover. I
think I
get
still
I
have
get
it over
Elijah's cup because he never comes. So Ilya is Elijah, you know.
Yeah, so I like that. I should also say, you know, Pope Francis just passed away this morning, and I'm praying for him. And I think maybe Angel Studios should make an actual movie about the conclave, not the blasphemy that was released by Hollywood. That made the Pope be trans or something like that. I refused to watch it. Thank God. I had bought tickets to go watch it with my girlfriend, and then a friend of mine told me, Daniel, don't go. And she spoiled the end, and I'm like, wow, thank God we switched, because it would have been a total waste of time. So let's push back against the Hollywood blasphemy.
Wait, are you saying that Raihan should run for Pope instead of mayor?
Good. There's the episode title.
That's
Raihan
even
Blonde
funnier.
for Pope.
That's even better.
I will admit I was discussing this question with my wife, and she gave me my answer, which is what she said is she really wants the story of Exodus after they leave Egypt, the 40 years in the desert. She wants that story told by Wes Anderson as a comedy, which I would absolutely watch. I think that would be excellent. All right. I believe that is about all the time that we have. So thank you, as always, to our panelists. Thank you to our producer, Isabella Reggi. Listeners, if you have enjoyed this episode, or even if you have not, we encourage you to like, subscribe for more content. Leave comments and questions below. Who knows, at some point we might even read some of them in this closing segment. Until next time, you've been listening to the City Journal podcast. We hope you'll join us again soon.